Okay, welcome everyone. I am Jenny Levine, Associate Director for OLLI at Duke, and I am thrilled to be presenting our Community Read program with this very special book by Judy Goldman, Together, a Memoir of Marriage, and a Medical Mishap. The author herself will be in conversation with Judith Ruderman, well known to OLLI members of long standing. This program would not be possible without the skillful efforts of OLLI member Jean Yoakum, who has been guiding our Community Read program for many years. Thank you, Jean. This program is being recorded, so please be aware that if you ask a question, your name and question will be recorded as well. We would love to see your questions in the chat, and we'll pause to answer them at the end of the program. Now for introductions. Judith Ruderman is a retired vice provost and adjunct professor of English at Duke, where she earned her Ph.D. She was the director of continuing education in the summer session for 12 years before moving into central administration and taught several classes for Diller, as OLLI was then known, along with undergraduate and MALS credit courses. She wrote 5 books of literary criticism and numerous essays and book reviews. She received the Harry T. Moore Award for lifetime contributions to D.H. Lawrence Studies and the Duke University Medal for service to the university. She was the first female president of the D.H. Lawrence Society of North America and lectures on Lawrence-related topics, as well as in Jewish American literature. Judy Goldman is the author of 8 books, including 4 memoirs, 2 novels, and 2 poetry collections. Her latest memoir, The Rest of Our Lives, was released from Blair in May 2025. The book we'll discuss today, Together, a Memoir of a Marriage and a Medical Mishap, was named the best book of 2019 by Real Simple magazine, is an editor's pick on Amazon, and was a book of the month for our state magazine. Born and raised in Rock Hill, South Carolina, Goldman has lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for many years. She and her husband have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. Welcome to you both. Now I'll turn it over to Judith.
Thank you, Jenny. It is such a pleasure to be here. I feel as if I've been given a gift to have been asked to interview Judy Goldman, not only because her work is wonderful, but because I feel a little bit like Herman Melville when he first encountered the works of Nathaniel Hawthorne. And notice how I have elevated Judy. I've elevated both of us with that
Yes.
comparison. Melville said he felt a shock of recognition. And I'll put it a different way. I'll put it a Judy Goldman way. What she said when she got together with Henry for the first time, she said, "We were so much alike, I felt a rush of recognition." Judy and I have so much in common. We're both named Judy. We're both about the same age. Our fathers were named Ben, and they were called Benny. Our sisters were born in 1938, and each of us has identical twin granddaughters, which may be the most astounding thing. And I could find other coincidences, but I'll just say that in a sense, I felt as if Judy and I were actually co-joined twins. Of course, when she came out of the womb, she headed south and I headed north. But that's the way I feel about Judy. I feel a kinship with her. And I've read everything she's written that has been collected as a book. And Judy, it's a gift. Thank you so much.
Judith, I would say that you are a gift. Truly, you are a gift. Any
Well,
writer would love to be interviewed by someone like Judith. Really, this is such a privilege and such a gift. And I love that we have this connection now through Ollie. Jenny, thank you for your introduction, by the way. It was lovely. And welcome to everybody who's here with us today. I'm happy to see all these names on my screen. But Judith, this is such a privilege and a gift for me too. Thank you.
well, thank you. Now, Judy, you wrote your earliest artistic creation, let's say, when you were 8 years old. It was a
Yeah.
poem about Joe, I don't remember which memoir that's in. Maybe it's in Together and maybe it's in one of the others. But you didn't know anybody named Joe, but you thought Joe rhymed with a lot of words, so you picked Joe.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
since that time, you've written not only a poetry, but four memoirs. You have two novels, and you also wrote ad copy, uh, book reviews, commentaries, essays. Talk to us about the experience of working in so many genres.
Well, I don't necessarily recommend doing what I've done. It's sort of an odd strategy that I have adopted because as soon as I almost begin to master a genre, then I drop it and go to something new, and then I begin the learning curve all over again. It's not a smart strategy, Judith, but it seems to be my strategy. So that's what I've done. But here's the thing. I really started out in poetry. I started writing poems, as you said, when I was 8 years old. Um, and then when I was an adult, and both of my parents were going through the process of dying at the same time, and I was in my 30s. I could have taken to my bed, but instead I took to my typewriter and I started writing poetry, very, very maudlin poetry about loss. Everything was about loss. A friend of mine said, Judy, you are the high priestess of loss. That's what I wrote about. Poetry, two books of poetry published. Then I decided I wanted to write a novel. And I did write two novels, but here's the thing, and I don't want anybody on this call to read either of my novels. That's a terrible thing to say. I know. But I'm not a novelist. I'm not a fiction writer. I do not like inventing. I don't like making things up. I wrote those two novels, both with um, thinly veiled attempts at writing fiction when I really was yearning to write nonfiction. So after my second novel was published, I turned to memoir. And memoir is my home now. I mean, I've published four memoirs. I have a new memoir coming out, in fact, next year. And then I've written another one sort of quickly by accident. I need to work on it. But I think, Judith, the reason I'm so drawn to memoir is because it feels like a circle. It feels like I'm circling back to poetry because both of those genres are so much more intimate. Both of those genres, poetry and memoir, feel like you're having an intimate fireside chat with the reader. And that's what appeals to me. So that's sort of a quick history of me and my various genres.
Well, I'm going to get to memoir writing in a minute, but first I want to say people on this Zoom call do not listen to Judy Goldman when she says, don't read my two novels. They are excellent novels, both of them. And I didn't have to say that.
No, you didn't. And my mother would say, Judy, just say thank you. So I'll just say thank you. But
Well,
really
okay.
and truly, okay, I want to say something about that. My
Okay.
first novel was a novel about sisters. I was just yearning to write the story of my older sister and me. It was the primary story of my life, my sister and me. It was so important to me. But I didn't think that I had the right to write it straight out. So I wrote it as fiction. And then, as you know, much later, I wrote a memoir called Losing My Sister. And that memoir is about losing my sister through disagreement,
Hmm.
back together again, and then losing her in the most final way, of course, when she died. So I finally wrote the story I wanted to write, which was the story of my sisters, but I wrote it two different ways, fiction, nonfiction.
Well, you've already brought up three things that I wanted to ask you about, so I'm just not going to worry about which order I ask them about for you. Let me start with sisters then, which was not going to be one of the first things, but it is now. So, Losing My Sister is one of Judy's four memoirs and one of the two I love the best.
Oh.
Yeah, I love this. Is it because I have an older sister born in 1938 who I'm glad happy to say is still with us? She will last longer than me. She's a feisty broad, my sister. But I want to ask you about several relationships, and one is with sisters. Your fascination, almost want to say your obsession with sisters.
Mhm.
In one of your characters in, I think it's your first novel, The Slow Way Back. That's
Mhm.
your first novel. Her name is Joy, and her favorite writer is E.M. Forster, which remind in your novel, and it reminds me that the motto for his novel, Howard's End, was only connect. And you are all about relationships. You're just waiting in those three boxes behind you to hang up all your family pictures because you said you have a whole wall of family pictures. So in that first novel, you say sisters matter more than anything. And your relationship with your sister, as it put into that novel, is so interesting because the mother of the main character is also an agglomeration, that's not a word I know, of sisters. And your own mother had her two sisters. And I love the picture of your mother and her sisters in one of your books. It might be
Mhm.
Losing My
Losing my
Sister.
sister, yeah.
Yes, I know. And their favorite book is Little Women, which is all about sisters. So, since you brought up Brenda, your sister, your dear departed sister, tell us more about sisters in your works and your
Well,
life.
okay, you use the word obsession, and I tell students in my writing workshops, particularly my memoir writing workshops, I tell them you have to write about what keeps you up at night. You have
Mm.
to write out of your obsession because you're going to spend a long time writing a book, and it needs to be something that you are driven to write and you don't mind spending a lot of time with. In my family, sisters were very important. Sisters were elevated. It was my grandmother and her sister, it was my mother and her two sisters, and then it was my sister and me. Um, when you put that much pressure on a relationship, in other words, sisters are close. That's what we grew up hearing, my sister and me. Sisters are close. We braid each other's hair. We share each other's jewelry. Sisters are close. When you put that much focus on a relationship, sometimes there are cracks in the relationship. And my sister and I really struggled. We worked hard to stay close, and we were able to stay close even though we were so different. I think that's why I wrote the novel, The Slow Way Back, about sisters, and the memoir, Losing My Sister, about sisters, because I was trying to learn how can sisters stay close when they're told their whole lives how different they are.
As you were with Brenda. She was
Yeah.
supposed to be one way, you the other. And you say in one or more of the memoirs, that wasn't exactly the case. You actually were and are tough, and not only the sweet little younger sister. I just have
Right.
to tell you that my identical twin granddaughters, when they were very small, called each other Sissy. And so my sister is 88 years old. She and I still call each other Sissy. Well, if I call her up, she's on Long Island, she'll answer the phone. Is this my sissy? Now, is that ridiculous? It's
No.
two ancient crones sitting in the rocking chairs calling each other sissy.
No, no, no. You said this yourself, Judith. It's all about connection.
Yeah, yeah.
How we connect. Sometimes we disconnect. Hopefully we reconnect.
Yeah. So I saw a lot of myself and my sister in your relationship. And it wasn't always, that song, Never where there's such devoted
Hmm.
sisters. Oh,
Right,
yes, and also no.
right.
So that was one relationship that I really loved, and that's why I love that memoir so much. Another memoir, I shouldn't say I had favorites, but I think if I had to pick two of your four, those are the second one is the one about Maddie, and it's called Child. And in our Durham County Library, we only had it as an ebook, so I don't have it to show people the cover, but it is all about Maddie Culp, who in old Southern parlance might have been called a mammy, but of course we don't use that term anymore. Um, you deal with race relations in other aspects of your memoir, in other memoirs, but this one focuses on Maddie and why, and it's called Child because she did raise you in a sense, but you stayed with her all of her life. A connection, only connect. And so between that and your teaching in the newly integrated school in Atlanta, which we find in, I think, two of your memoirs,
Hmm.
I'm just intrigued by your discussions of race relations. So I wonder what you'd like to say about that growing up in a certain Southern town or your relationship with Maddie. Anything you want to say about that connection?
Well, I think that you framed it perfectly because I view race through the lens of Maddie.
Mhm.
She came to live with my family when I was 3 years old, and she lived with us for many, many years. Um, I remember visitors coming to visit my parents from New York. And when I opened my mouth to speak, and then when Maddie spoke, they said, Judy and Maddie talk exactly alike. I talked like Maddie. I wanted to be Maddie. I wanted to be hers. My mother and I were very, very close, and Maddie and I were very, very close too. And the way I viewed it is that Maddie took care of me when I was a child, and then I took care of Maddie when she was older. And so I felt like it was a balanced relationship. It was the relationship that it was meant to be in that time. Um, Now, Judy and race, it's interesting because my new memoir coming out next year is really about college age Judy and race, but I won't talk so much about that, talk about what I've already done. Um, I think it's a subject I have wrestled with growing up in Rock Hill, South Carolina in the 40s and 50s. Um, the whole idea of race and how it related to me as a Jewish person growing up in Rock Hill. All of that is all mixed in together for me. How we make other people other, the different ways that we do that, the different ways that we celebrate separateness when we really need to be celebrating togetherness. And that's what I struggle with where race is concerned and where religion is concerned as well. Um, I think that's an answer to your question, but
Yes.
I love that you like my memoir Child because I really wanted to write that memoir for as long as I could remember. And I think the first poem I ever wrote as an adult was entitled Maddie, and it was about her. And I never did one thing with it. You can't talk about that. How do you talk about a Black woman who helped raise you? And I'm a privileged white child. You can't tell that story. It's not okay to tell. And so I put the poem in my desk. I never showed it to a person. And finally, in my 70s, I decided I'm going to write the story of us, and I'm going to try to be as honest as I can be in the telling.
Well, I have to say one thing I love about child, and yes, the answer to the question of somebody who put it in the chat room, yes, that is Maddie at Judy's wedding to Henry. That's Maddie in the background. Maddie would never not be invited to the
No,
wedding.
no, no, no.
Maddie would be the first one invited to the wedding. What I love about that memoir is that you superimpose your adult understanding of race and of your own childhood with the feelings of the child being raised, in a sense, good sense, by Maddie. They're both there in the memoir. These are the gifts you've given us, Judy. Each of your memoirs is wise. And so I'm particularly happy with that book. And then in two different memoirs, you talk about teaching in that high school in Atlanta and what students said and what they said when John Kennedy was assassinated. Why don't you tell
I'll
that
tell about
story?
that. I want to back up for a minute because I want to thank you for recognizing that in my memoir, Child, there is the grown-up Judy looking back on the way things were and having that wisdom or that experience at least, and then the child Judy who is clueless basically and just involved in the relationship. And that's important. One of the things that I teach in my memoir workshops is that the question you ask yourself when you're writing memoir, and this might be interesting for all of y'all to know when you're reading memoir, here's the central question. What do I know now that I did not know then? That's the question. And so, Child was the perfect memoir for that question because race is so loaded and you are so innocent as a child growing up in the Jim Crow South. But as an adult, you understand so much more and you understand that there are many, many sides to this question that seems so flat and one-sided when you were a child.
Well, you, in all your works, you go back and forth in time, and often for different reasons. In this book, Child, as you just discussed, we have the adult consciousness and the child's consciousness, and we need to go back and forth to get them in together. And I know people are thinking, what is she going to talk about together? That's what
Mhm.
we read. Come on, that's why we're together here. But actually, I want everybody to read all your work. So I'll get to together, or people in the chat room will ask questions and Jenny will
Thank you.
address them about together. I'll get to together. But one of the things you do in together is go back in time with Henry and forward in time to his situation in the hospital and with the terrible medical the mishaps, more than one actually. And there you state what your reason is, why you go back. You say sometimes when you're in a traumatic situation, you need to go back to a more stable time to remind you of things. So I just want to repeat, I have found that in each of your memoirs, you do use the same technique, but often for different purposes. I think that's brilliant.
Well, thank you. It is not so much brilliant as it is initially a problem. With every single one of my books, the main criticism, so let me back up for a minute. What I do with each book is I swap manuscripts with other writers. I read their manuscript, they read my manuscript, we give each other suggestions. And the criticism I get with every single book is, Judy, you have two books here. You need to either write this book or that book. And I think, no, no, I don't have two books here. My job is to make them work and to create that braid that makes two books be that that allows me to fool the reader into thinking I've only written one book when really and truly I am sort of writing two different books. But with Together, it was so natural to do that because when you suddenly find yourself in such unfamiliar territory, in such uncharted territory, you are yearning for the familiar. You are yearning for what you know and what you love. And so I think it's very natural when you're in the middle of illness, when you're in the middle of hospital days, when you're in the middle of rehab days, you cling to what you knew. And it seems so natural to go back and forth. But I've truly got that criticism with Together as well. You've written two books, Judy, and I thought, okay, my job is to put them together.
You did put them together, and your subtitle tells it all: a memoir of a marriage and a medical mishap, or how the marriage works in with the medical mishap and vice versa. So the other, of course, the other connection that's very salient in your work, well, there are several. Put your parents aside because that's also a big topic, but it's with your husband. So the one of the epigraphs to Together is strikes me as wonderful. It's by Henny Youngman. And he says, the secret to a good marriage remains a secret. Now, that he meant as a joke because he was implying it's a secret because there ain't no good marriages. So, he's the one who said, take my wife, please.
Right.
But you actually do spill your secrets to a good marriage. And in fact, you're very explicit about the secrets to a good marriage. So talk to us about your marriage, if that's not too personal.
No, not when you write memoir, nothing is too personal. It's all out there. And usually one question after I give a talk will always be, how can you tell such personal things, Judy? And I think really and truly, don't we all have very similar personal things? And so why do we need to keep them secret? Let's just talk about them and bring them out. That just feels natural to me. But I do, I'm laughing because you named two things about Henny Youngman and the secrets to a good marriage. And I know a third funny secret to a good marriage, and that is that Bruce Paltrow and his wife, Blythe Danner, who are
Right.
parents of Gwyneth Paltrow. Okay, Bruce and Gwyneth had a very long Hollywood marriage, which is unusual, right? And so the two of them were being interviewed about their long Hollywood marriage, and they were asked, what's the secret to your marriage? And Blythe Danner started saying all these, lovely things, communication, this, that, all these abstract things. And then the interviewer turned to Bruce and said, what do you think the secret is? And he said, we never wanted a divorce at the same time.
And
So
that is one of your secrets.
that's,
Never, when you're arguing, never say, I'm going to get a divorce or I'm going
mhm,
to leave you. You're very explicit about that. You offer
mhm.
us a lot of good advice, and you made the protagonist of your first novel a therapist who's
Oh,
always giving advice. And you say you like to give advice.
I love giving advice. In fact, if I had time for another career, I do love writing books. But if I had time for another career, it would be to be a therapist. And I would really like to be a therapist on the radio. That to me would be ideal.
Like your heroine,
That's why
like your
I
hero,
gave
I should
my
say.
narrator in my first novel that job. I made her a therapist on the radio because I would like to be a therapist on the radio because I feel that I have an uncanny sense of what everybody else should be doing with their lives. I don't know what I should be doing with my life necessarily, but I know what other people should do. And so it seemed that the book Together was a natural place to talk about my theories of marriage. And I hope I was honest. I hope I wasn't too too busy creating a beautiful image. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give the full picture of a marriage, of a real marriage, because marriage has a way of being real throughout it is. And one of the hardest things in marriage, of course, is accepting the changes that take place within a
Mhm.
marriage. And I really believe that's what the book Together is about. It's
Mhm.
about the slow, gradual changes that take place as a result of time. And it's about the sudden, abrupt changes that shock us, like my husband's medical mishap. And then all of a sudden, you're in a whole new life, and your roles in the marriage shift, who you are with each other shifts, who you are out in the world shifts, how you see yourself, how you see your partner, all of that shifts. And that's what I wanted to talk about because I'm going to say one more thing. I think that one of the other subtexts of all my memoirs is dealing with uncertainty. I have a really hard time dealing with uncertainty. I want everything to be predictable, and it's just not. Life is not predictable. The only thing is change.
Right.
And I think that's the central core of Together.
When you said you hoped you weren't too hard, is that what you how you put it? The late great Fred Chappell has a blurb on the back of your first book of poetry. It's like 1987, and he called it "Memories Untarnished by Sentimentality." And
Mm,
that's what
that's
I think all your memories are. They're untarnished by some. They don't. Although you do say in Losing My Sister that memoir is. You say the act of remembering is inevitably an act of revision. So it's not necessarily exactly how it happened, but it is not sentimentalized ever
Thank
with
you
your
for saying
writing.
that because that's exactly what we want to fight against in writing memoir. It's so easy to be sentimental. It's so easy to get lost in the forest of the self.
Yeah.
There are all these memories, and we all like to talk about ourselves. I remember I joined a book club of very serious, accomplished women. It was a wonderful group, but I was the only one who brought a memoir. Um, and one of the comments was, well, she just talks about herself, you know. And I thought, yeah, that's memoir. But there's a great danger to writing memoir and being too sentimental about your own memories. And I'll say one more thing about Together, and that is, I never wanted to write that book. When my husband's epidural went so wrong. So many people who heard about it, friends of ours, said to me, "Oh, Judy, I'll bet you'll write about this." And my answer was always, "No, I am not going to write about this. I've lived it once, and I don't want to live it a second time by writing about it." But then, those of you who read Together know that I was part of a holdup, a robbery at the dry cleaners. And when that happened, and my reaction to that holdup was such sadness, I could not stop crying after the holdup. And I realized I'm finally crying about what happened to my husband when it
Right.
happened. I just had to deal with it and take charge. But now I can cry about my husband and think that I'm really crying about a holdup. And when that holdup happened, I started writing about the whole experience. And in fact, I started the book off with the holdup. That was the opening scene in Together.
Ah,
And then I moved it to the middle,
yeah.
and then it got moved to the
At
end.
the end.
Yeah, a
So,
whole different construction.
My daughter and I are very snarky about memoirs that seem overly sentimental and not earned, and we call them memoirs. So that's there's a difference between the way you write a memoir and those who write memoirs. When you get the feeling as a reader, it's all about them, and who cares? We all care. I want to ask you because our time of talking together is growing short, and people have a lot of questions for you. And Jenny is going to field those questions at 3:45. But I want to ask you two things about readers and critics, because you brought up the word critics. So in 1943, Robert Graves, the poet, co-authored a handbook for writers, and it was called The Reader Over My Shoulder. And it was about how writers should be cognizant as they write of their readers. So I'm going to ask you a two-part question. The first is about readers, the second is about critics. So how conscious of you as you write, how conscious of you are you of your readership?
I believe the answer to that is I have a really, really good friend who's a wonderful writer. I'll tell you her name so you can look for her book. She writes fiction, and her name is Abigail DeWitt. Abigail DeWitt. She writes wonderful novels. In fact, she's going to have a novel coming out next year also. But we read each other's manuscripts. We talk about the whole career of writing and all the parts of publishing. We're just very close on many different levels, but we share writing, which is wonderful. And Abigail is sort of my ideal reader, although Judith, I think you're going to become my ideal reader, being so lovely to me today. But I picture Abigail when I'm writing. And sometimes when I write something that I think is funny, I'll think, oh, Abigail's going to really laugh when she reads this. So I think that I'm such a minimalist in everything that even my ideal audience becomes minimal in that it's
Hmm.
that one person I can picture that I'm writing for. And it helps give me self-confidence because it's very easy to have that voice in your head or that person over your shoulder, as Robert Graves mentioned, who is saying, oh, Judy, you're not a writer. Oh, Judy, this is a dumb idea for a book. You can't do it. It's so easy for that voice to take over. But instead, I think of my friend Abigail and I write for her. So I think that's an answer to that question.
Yes, and you anticipated my next question, which was, you've already addressed it, which was, there's also a phrase of the critic who sits on your shoulder, meaning you. I'll deal with the external critics in a second, but how critical are you of yourself as you are? You said you implied, well, thinking of your ideal reader helps you to combat that critic sitting on your shoulder, namely you, self-criticism. Talk to us about
I
self-criticism.
have such a perfect answer for that, Judith. Yesterday, I received the edits from my editor for my new memoir that's coming out next year. I read through her suggestions, and here's what I thought. I'm not smart enough to do this. I can't do this. Let's just
Hmm.
forget it. I don't need to publish another book. I can just say, never mind, let's skip it. That was my thinking. I'm not kidding. That
Yeah.
was my thinking. It threw me. But every single time this happens, this is what my husband, when I told my husband, I think I'm going to cancel this book contract. I mean, really. Um, he said, Judy, you do this every time. You've done it 8 times now. This is your ninth time doing it. Okay. Today, I'm working on the new book. It's fine. Her
Good for
her
you.
editing is wonderful. She's so smart, and I am going to be able to do it. So that's a perfect answer to your question about that inner critic inside all of us that rears its head. And as far as reviews and really outside critics,
Mhm.
I know so many writers who say they never read any of their reviews. I read all of my reviews. I'm very interested to hear what people say because I could learn something from them.
And
Even
have you?
when it's negative, I have learned things. Yeah, it's one particular critic talked about my first novel and said that it sounded like a commentary on the radio on NPR. Well, I used to do commentaries for NPR. I wrote them and delivered them, and it did sound like that. And so I had to be aware of that. That was good. It was the San Francisco Chronicle that said that about my first novel.
See, you didn't forget who said that.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
We
I can
don't
still
forget
see
those things.
myself reading that review, how bad it was.
Well, I just want to say again, I think both of your novels are very, very worth reading, uh, as are your four memoirs. Your most recent memoir is about aging, the rest of our lives. And again, I feel I know more about your family than I know about my own. And part of that, and I love to read biographies, autobiographies, and memoirs. It's a little bit like one of your poems in your first collection, which is entitled something like, I like to look into lighted houses. You
Mhm,
know, you pass
mhm,
by, you see what people are
mhm,
doing in their lighted.
mhm,
Well, you
mhm.
have created a lighted house for us in all your memoirs. And I feel I know your family extremely well. That includes your parents and your aunts and your uncles and everybody. So now, we're mishpucha now, Judy. So,
Thank you.
the
I will
last,
just say thank you.
okay,
The lovely thing to say.
the last thing I'll ask you, because we have just 2 minutes before Jenny comes on now to field the questions. Everybody's burning to ask you, what was it like being Jewish in a small southern town?
I think that because my parents did something very unusual, it was really quite lovely. That's what I would say. My parents were very much a part of the Jewish community. They helped found the synagogue for 12 families. Um, they were just very involved, and anybody who knew us in Rock Hill knew that we were a Jewish family. At the same time, they were very much a part of the town. My father was on the board of this and the board of that. My mother was on the Christmas tour of homes. I mean, they felt that they belonged in both worlds. And because they were so comfortable in both worlds, my brother and my sister and I grew up comfortable in both worlds. And so I love my growing up in Rock Hill. And in fact, every book I write, I always put Rock Hill in the book. I will never write a book that doesn't have something about Rock Hill in it.
I've been to Rock Hill, by the way.
It's a wonderful little town and
Yes,
it's a wonderful town to grow up in. So I think that's a good answer to that question.
I do too,
And
and I think it's time to let our audience have their say because they're itching, I'm sure, to talk about together.
Thank you both. This has been so great to listen to. I have some comments myself, but I'll start with a question from Jean in the chat. After Henry's mishap, how have you been able to get back your trust with healthcare providers?
that is such a good question. It really is. Well, I believe that together, another purpose of writing that book was to learn to forgive. And I believe I put this in the book, if I'm not mistaken. Sometimes
Yes,
I forget what is in a
you
book and
did.
what is not. But I needed to forgive um, the doctor who administered the epidural. He wanted to help my husband feel better. He did not want to hurt him. I can imagine the shock in him when it happened. So I needed to forgive him. And once you forgive, then I believe that establishes trust again because you know that medical people, I mean, they really are trying to help us. But I also needed to forgive my husband because once it happened, I was wishing that he had tried other things. Why not physical therapy? Why not acupuncture? Why not all kinds of things? But he was just trying to feel better. And then I realized I had to forgive myself because all we really want is to keep our loved ones safe. And I could not keep my husband safe. So there's a lot of forgiving going on in that book. But the first forgiving was of medical people and know that they really only want to help us.
Thank you. I hope to be as evolved as that someday. Question from Linda. Many of us are dealing with family members with Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. How do you think your story would have differed if Henry's medical mishap had involved mental or cognitive damage rather than physical?
Well, that's such a question, such a smart question. I did deal with Alzheimer's in that my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when she was in her 60s. We really started seeing changes in my mother when she was in her early 60s. I didn't even know what Alzheimer's meant when the doctor diagnosed her with Alzheimer's. I had never heard that word before because back then you talked about senility or early senility. Um, so I did deal with my mother's Alzheimer's. And then my husband has had a stroke, which affected him somewhat. So I deal with that within our marriage. Um, I think it takes a lot of patience. I think it takes a lot of patience. I think it takes a lot of patience. I'll just say that 3 times. I think it takes compassion and understanding. I think what I remind myself is that if the situation were reversed and my loved one was dealing with me and I was the one with cognitive impairment, they would do it very lovingly. And so I want to do it very lovingly. That's my goal. I don't always meet it. I didn't always meet it with my mother. I haven't always met it with my husband, but that's my goal. I think that's a good answer to that question.
Very
And I'm
good.
sorry if you who asked the question, was it Linda, I think,
Mhm.
is dealing with Alzheimer's in your family. So much um, sympathy and empathy for you, if that's what you're dealing with.
Linda says, thank you. We're all on our own journeys. It's so nice to have you as an example. Francis asked, have you ever put family photos in your memoirs? I would have loved to see photos of your family.
Oh, I would love to put family photos in my memoirs. In Child, there are photos. Wait a minute.
Oh,
Are
in
there
losing my
photos?
sister, you have a lot of
A
photos.
lot of photos in losing my sister, yeah.
A
But what
lot.
about there are no photos in the hardback of Together? I can't remember.
Well, I have not the hardback, so
No, the of Together. I
I
don't
don't see any photos in the paperback.
know. Then no, you're looking at the rest of our lives.
Oh, sorry.
Um, I do remember the covers. If I can't remember what I put in them. Oh, you got the paperback.
You
Yeah.
don't have any photos in the paperback.
Okay. Okay. I have such a hard time remembering different books at this point. But yeah, I wish I had family photos in all the memoirs, but there are a good many family photos in Losing My Sister and in The Slow Way Back. Yeah.
Tons of I'm returning it to the library after this talk. And so people can go check out
You can
Losing My
also
Sister.
buy it.
And they should buy it,
I'm
yes.
kidding. But yes, support your library too.
You have such a gift, Judy. If anyone else wants to put questions in the chat, meanwhile, I'm going to share the comments that you inspired me to write because you're just that gifted a teacher. You didn't even know you were inspiring me sitting here. I wrote in your two books, um, you do a beautiful job of bringing to life both the current moment and the memories with so much detail to the point that I'm sure many have envied your capacity for memory. Your lifelong habit of writing has come in very handy indeed. I love that you shared your mother's habit of keeping a diary. It seems like something she passed along to you.
That's so true. Yeah, I have written forever. I mean, I not only wrote poetry in the third grade, but I also started keeping a diary when I was in the third grade. And I kept diaries all the way through 12th grade. And then when I was a young married person and a young mother, I kept journals. So I've always wanted to record not only the events of my life, but my reactions to those events. I've always liked recording all that. So, and what I find about writing memoir, and I'm wondering how many of you are interested in writing memoir, um, what I find is that the more I remember, the more I remember. And also, just the act of writing memories down will help you bring forth more memories, in fact. Um, a very simple exercise is just to write at the top of your page, I remember. I remember, and then go. And maybe time it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you want. And you can either write memory, or take one memory and go deeply into it. It doesn't matter what you do, there's no wrong way to do it. But just, and I do that very often. I remember. What do I remember? And I just start writing. You'll be surprised at what you can remember.
And you mentioned your minimalist, I assume minimalist writing and language. It's so clear. There's no extra fluff. There's not that sentiment. It's a pleasure to read. There's
Thank you.
another question from Linda. Is there a recommended order to reading your four memoirs? Where should we start?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. No, you just start wherever you like. I repeat some stories in different memoirs. I know I do that. And maybe I expand on the stories later in a later memoir than I told in an earlier memoir. But no, there's no order. Each one is its own narrative. So they don't hinge on each other at all. And as far as being a minimalist, Jenny, I'll say this, that's the other criticism I get for my manuscripts, and that is expand, expand. And I am always pushing things down. I was also an advertising copywriter for many years, and that teaches you to be very succinct. Get in, say what you're going to say, and get out. And so I still, and also I was a poet. So, everything within me says distill, get it down to its essence. And my struggle in writing is to expand and put enough out there. When I when I moved from poetry to fiction and decided to write a novel, I read in the New York Times book review section, I saw a novel written about, reviewed, that was 105 pages, I believe it was. And so when people would ask me, what are you writing now? I would say I'm writing a 105-page novel because I thought I just have to get up to 105 pages. If I can just do that, I'll have a novel. And that's my problem is getting it big enough to be a book.
That's great. Couple more questions popped up in the chat from I happened to come across The Rest of Our Lives, which I liked very much, and then saw Ollie was hosting this conversation. I've enjoyed hearing you very much. Have you ever recorded your memories and then transposed to writing?
Thank you for what you said. Have I ever recorded my memories? No, I have not. I have not done that. I think that writing is what I do. Well, when I recorded commentaries for NPR, that was me recording memories. So I guess I have really, in a sense, and those were very short. But yeah, I guess that's the answer. I did do that, and that probably led me into writing memoir, that experience.
Wonderful. So Francis is asking if you had any involvement with the audiobook.
So, I really wanted to do the audiobooks myself. Um,
Ah,
I really wanted to, but most companies, unless you are John Grisham, a Margaret Atwood, they're not wanting the author to get involved that much with it. But I did have a vote on the actresses that they use. They would send me tapes, and I got to pick whom I wanted to use. I felt that the audiobook for Child, that's the one I really wanted to do.
mhm.
Um, I felt that her Southern accent was not real, and that bothered me.
Ouch.
Those of us who have a Southern accent, we know when a Southern accent is not genuine, and and that was a problem for me. But other people haven't mentioned it, so maybe it was just me. Thank you for that question, though.
That's all we have in the chat for now. Unless anything else pops up, I'll let you know. I am also halfway through the audiobook and I'm on the edge of my seat. I can't wait to get back to it.
Thank
Um,
you.
What is your forthcoming memoir titled, and when can we expect it? And what is it about?
So the title is A Simple Case, and the title comes from a quote from To Kill a Mockingbird when Atticus Finch says, "This is a simple case. It should never have been brought to trial. It's just a matter of black and white." And what I am writing about is an experience that I had when I was a junior at the University of Georgia. So we're talking about 1962, Athens, Georgia, deep south. And my in my sorority, the black houseboy, which is what he would have been called then, even though he was a man, he was called a houseboy. The black houseboy in our sorority allegedly raped our elderly white house mother.
Hmm.
And I was a witness for the defense. I was a character witness against my house mother and for the young man. And I never really talked about this experience all these years. And because I thought it would sound like I was trying to sound too progressive or too enlightened or something. And just recently, I started writing about it. And as I was writing about it, I was able to find the lawyer whom I testified for, and he was able to find the court documents, the transcript of the trial, and send them to me. And so then I had all this material, and I had the knowledge of what had happened after the sentencing to the young man. So I had a book. So that's the book that I have written that I'm now editing with my editor. And it's supposed to come out, I believe, either spring or fall of 2027. So let's hope it will not be a posthumous book. Let's hope that I will be around. I keep wanting to say to her, couldn't we rush it through? I mean, do you not see how old I am? We need to do this quickly. But publication of a book takes usually a year to 18 months. So there it is. Thank you for asking about it.
well, we are right at time. I want to thank you both so much for this conversation. I'm more surprises and delights, and I look forward to reading your books, as I'm sure many in our audience do. Um, if anyone wants to come off mute and say thank you or farewell, you're welcome to do so.
I
Be
just
wrapping
wanted
up
to
here.
say that while I was multitasking while I was listening, so I put a hold on losing my sister. So Judith, get that back to the library because I
I'm
don't have
going,
it.
I'm going.
All right, all right.
Thank you.
Support your local library and your local bookshop.
Both, definitely both. Thank you, Jenny, for hosting us. Thank you, Judith, for doing a spectacular job interviewing. Oh my gosh, thank you, thank you. And thank you all of you for being here.
Had a
Thank,
wonderful time with you, Judy, and the audience. Thank you.
Mhm,
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
mhm. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.